The fluorescent lights of the downtown precinct buzzed overhead as Detective Sarachin stared at the evidence board, her coffee growing cold in her hands. 3 photographs stared back at her, 3 young men who had all met violent ends within 6 months of each other. But it wasn't their connection to each other that made her stomach turn. It was the 4th photograph pinned at the center, a 22-year-old woman with bright eyes and a microphone in her hand. Maya Johnson's smile seemed to mock the chaos surrounding her image. Red string connected her photo to newspaper clippings, witness statements, and crime scene photos that told a story Chen wished she didn't have to unravel. The evidence board had become her obsession over the past 3 weeks, a puzzle that kept her awake at night and made her question everything she thought she knew about justice. "Detective, you need to see this." Officer Martinez appeared at her elbow, holding a manila folder like it might explode. His usually steady hands were trembling, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the precinct's aggressive air conditioning. "We just got the ballistics report back on the Williams case." Chen's pulse quickened. Deshaun Williams was victim number 3, found in an alley behind a recording studio with 2 bullets to the chest. The same recording studio where Maya Johnson had performed her last rap battle 8 months ago. The coincidences in this case had stopped feeling like coincidences weeks ago, but Chen had been waiting for concrete proof. She opened the folder, scanning the technical jargon until her eyes locked onto a single line that made her blood run cold. The bullets matched. All 3 victims had been eliminated with the same .38 caliber weapon. More than that, the ballistics expert had noted unusual scoring on the bullets that suggested the weapon had been fired many times. This wasn't a gun purchased for revenge. This was a weapon with history. "There's more," Martinez continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Patrol just picked up someone trying to dispose of something in the river. They found the gun, Detective." "And the person they arrested?" He paused, meeting her eyes with an expression that mixed relief and dread. "He's Maya Johnson's older brother." Chen set down her coffee with trembling hands, the bitter liquid sloshing over the rim and staining case files she'd read 100 times. After months of dead ends and sleepless nights, after interviewing witnesses who seemed to forget crucial details the moment she asked about them, after following leads that vanished like smoke, the case that had consumed her was about to crack wide open. She looked at Maya's photograph one more time, studying the confident smile and defiant eyes. The young woman in that picture had no idea that stepping onto a makeshift stage would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy lives, expose a criminal empire, and challenge everything Chen believed about the price of seeking justice. But as she gathered her files and prepared to interrogate David Johnson, she couldn't shake the feeling that arresting Maya's brother was only the beginning of something much darker. The evidence board told a story, but Chen was beginning to suspect it was the wrong story entirely. What had really happened the night Maya stepped off that stage for the last time? And why did Chen feel like she was about to uncover something that would change her understanding of this case and herself forever? Let us know what you think in the comments below. This case gets more twisted than you might expect. Detective Chen pulled David Johnson's file from the stack, studying the man who had just become her prime suspect. The photograph clipped to the folder showed a lean, serious-faced man with Maya's same intelligent eyes and determined jawline. At 28, David had a clean record, no arrests, not even a traffic ticket. His background check revealed a man who had spent his adult life building stability in a world that seemed determined to tear it down. David worked as a sound engineer at 3 different recording studios around the city, a grueling schedule that often kept him working 16-hour days. But according to everyone Chen had interviewed, he never complained. The money supported both himself and his sister's dreams in the underground rap scene, paying for studio time, equipment, and the countless small expenses that came with pursuing a career in music. Maya Johnson had been different from most artists Chen encountered in her cases. While other performers battled for money or fame, Maya battled for respect and truth. She had grown up in the Riverside projects with David, raised by their grandmother after their parents passed in a car accident when she was 14. Her lyrics spoke of resilience, of proving that talent could rise above circumstance, of using words as weapons against injustice. She was special, David had told officers during his initial questioning 8 months ago, tears streaming down his face as he sat in the same chair where Chen would soon question him about triple homicide. Maya wasn't like the others. She didn't rap about violence or money. She rapped about hope. About change. About speaking truth even when it was dangerous. Chen had listened to Maya's recordings dozens of times while working this case. The young woman's voice carried a power that transcended the underground venues where she performed. Her wordplay was intricate, her delivery fierce, and her message consistently focused on exposing hypocrisy and demanding accountability from those in power. The three victims painted a starkly different picture. Trey Anderson, 24, had been found in his apartment 3 months after Maya's disappearance, what appeared to be a home invasion gone wrong, but with no signs of forced entry and nothing valuable stolen. Next was Jerome Roberts, 26, discovered in his car in a parking garage 2 months later, killed with precision that suggested the shooter knew exactly what they were doing. Finally, Deshaun Williams, 25, found in that alley behind Studio 7 with 2 bullets placed center mass. Chen studied their backgrounds with growing unease. All three had been present at Maya's final battle at the underground venue called the Cypher. All three had reputations as skilled but ruthless battlers who weren't above personal attacks, intimidation tactics, and using information about their opponents' personal lives as ammunition. But their criminal records told a different story than simple rap battle drama. Trey Anderson had been arrested twice for assault, once for weapons possession, and had been questioned in connection with several robberies in the entertainment district. Jerome Roberts had a drug distribution charge that was mysteriously dropped, and multiple complaints filed against him for threatening local business owners who allegedly refused to pay protection money. Deshaun Williams had the cleanest record of the three, but Chen's investigation had revealed connections to known criminals and a lifestyle that far exceeded what he could have afforded through legitimate means. But David Johnson didn't fit the profile of someone seeking methodical vengeance. His co-workers at all three studios described him as quiet, dedicated, someone who kept to himself since his sister's disappearance. He was known for staying late to help younger artists with their recordings, often refusing payment from those who couldn't afford his services. His landlord praised him as a tenant who always paid rent early and helped elderly neighbors with repairs and groceries. His grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, now 83 and battling diabetes, relied on him for everything from medical appointments to grocery shopping. Chen had interviewed the woman twice, finding her sharp-minded despite her age and fiercely protective of both her grandchildren. "David's been my rock since Maya disappeared," Mrs. Johnson had told Chen during their first meeting. "He comes by every day after work, brings me dinner, helps with my medications. That boy has been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he's never let me down. Not once. Have you subscribed yet? Don't miss how this investigation unfolds." The interrogation room felt smaller than usual as Chen sat across from David Johnson. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion that seemed to emanate from his very bones. His hands shook as he gripped a paper cup of water, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow from what Chen suspected were months of sleepless nights. For a man who had just been caught disposing of a weapon used in 3 homicides, he seemed more desperate than defiant. "I need to tell you what really happened that night," David said before Chen could even turn on the recorder. His voice carried an urgency that made her pause with her finger hovering over the record button. "Maya didn't just lose a rap battle. She uncovered something that got her eliminated. And I've been living with that knowledge for 8 months." Chen leaned forward, studying his face for signs of deception. "What kind of something?" David's voice cracked as he began speaking faster, as if he'd been holding these words inside for months and couldn't control their release. The Cypher wasn't just an underground venue. It was a front. Those 3 men at Trey, Jerome, Deshaun, they were running something bigger. Maya found out about it during the battle, but she didn't realize how dangerous that knowledge was until it was too late. The story David told made Chen's pen freeze mid-sentence. According to him, Maya had arrived at the Cypher that night confident and prepared. She had been dominating the local scene for months, known for her sharp wordplay and ability to expose her opponent's weaknesses through her lyrics. But this battle was different. This battle was supposed to be her breakthrough moment. Maya had been working on something for weeks, David continued, his eyes distant as he recalled that night. "She'd been asking me questions about the studios I worked at, about which artists were making money that didn't match their streaming numbers or venue attendance. She was always suspicious when things didn't add up." During her battle against Trey Anderson, something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Maya's usual style of clever wordplay and metaphorical attacks had given way to something more direct and dangerous. Her final verse hadn't just attacked Trey's rap skills, it had called out specific details about drug operations, money laundering schemes, protection rackets targeting local businesses, and threats made to artists who refused to participate in illegal activities. She named addresses, detective. Specific businesses that were being extorted. She talked about percentages and territory boundaries that she couldn't have known unless someone had told her. Information that could have only come from inside their operation. Chen stopped writing and looked up at David. She had a source. Maya thought she was just getting material for her battle. David's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone inside their operation who wanted out had been feeding her information for weeks. Maya thought she was just getting dirt on her opponents, but she was actually exposing their entire network in front of 50 witnesses. The battle had ended with Maya's decisive victory, but the aftermath had been unlike anything anyone at the cipher had witnessed before. Instead of the usual post-battle celebration or grudging respect from her defeated opponents, the room had fallen into an uncomfortable silence that David described as electric with tension. Maya won. Destroyed all three of them with facts they couldn't deny. The crowd knew they had witnessed something special, but it wasn't celebration I saw in their faces. It was fear. Chen leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. What happened after the battle? Maya was still high from the victory when she got off stage. She was talking to friends, accepting congratulations, the usual stuff. But then Trey pulled her aside. I was across the room helping break down some equipment, but I could see them talking. Maya's expression changed from happy to confused to scared in the space of about 2 minutes. David's hands clenched into fists as he continued. Trey told her she had made a mistake talking about things that weren't her business. That some information wasn't meant to be entertainment. That there would be consequences if she ever performed that verse again or spoke about what she thought she knew. What did Maya do? She laughed at him. My sister was never one to back down from intimidation. She told Trey that if he didn't want people talking about his business, maybe he should conduct it more privately. Said she was a rapper, not a detective, and if he was worried about her lyrics, maybe he needed to examine his own actions. Chen felt her pulse quicken. Maya Johnson hadn't just stumbled into dangerous information, she had publicly challenged people who operated by rules very different from the rap battle scene. They followed her home that night. I was working late at Studio 7, trying to finish a project that was due the next morning. But our neighbor Mrs. Patterson called me around 11:30, said she saw 3 men waiting by Maya's car in the parking lot of our apartment building. Said something didn't feel right about the way they were just standing there, not talking, just watching. What did you do? David's voice broke completely. I dropped everything and rushed home, but by the time I got there. He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Maya was already gone. Where are you watching from? This case is about to take a turn you won't see coming. Over the next 3 days, Chen dove deeper into the underground world Maya Johnson had inhabited, and what she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about both the victims and the case itself. The cipher, located in a converted warehouse in the industrial district, had been shut down by the city 2 months after Maya's disappearance, officially for building code violations, but Chen's investigation revealed a more complex story. The venue's closure had come after a series of complaints from neighboring businesses about increased foot traffic, noise violations, and what several business owners described as intimidation tactics used against anyone who complained about the activities surrounding the cipher. But when Chen pressed for details, many of these business owners suddenly became reluctant to elaborate, claiming they couldn't remember specific incidents or suggesting that perhaps they had exaggerated their initial complaints. She tracked down witnesses from that final battle, but their stories kept changing in ways that suggested either coordinated deception or genuine fear. Some claimed they couldn't remember specific details about Maya's performance, describing it in vague terms that didn't match the explosive revelation David had described. Others had suddenly become unreachable, disconnected phone numbers, forwarding addresses that led nowhere, or family members who claimed the person Chen was looking for had moved away for work. The deeper Chen dug, the more obvious it became that someone had been working systematically to keep Maya's final words buried and the people who heard them silent. Marcus Williams, Deshawn's younger brother, agreed to meet Chen at a diner across town after she assured him the conversation would be off the record. 19 years old with the same sharp features as his deceased brother, Marcus seemed older than his years as he nervously stirred sugar into his coffee for the 5th time. Deshaun changed after that battle, Marcus admitted, glancing around the nearly empty diner every few seconds as if expecting unwelcome company. My brother was always loud, you know? Always bragging about his wins, talking about how he was going to be the next big thing in the scene. But after Maya's performance, he got quiet. Real quiet. And paranoid. Paranoid about what? Marcus set down his spoon and leaned forward. He kept saying Maya knew things she shouldn't have known. That someone had been talking to her about business that wasn't hers to know. He was convinced that whoever was feeding her information was setting up everyone involved. Chen pressed further. What kind of business? Marcus glanced around the diner again before answering. Look, detective, my brother wasn't perfect. None of those guys were. But they weren't just battling for prize money and respect. The cipher was where they handled other things. Collections for people who owed debts. Territory disputes between different crews. Messages that needed to be delivered to people who weren't taking hints. The picture Marcus painted was of an underground scene that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it was exactly what it appeared to be: talented artists competing for recognition and prize money. But underneath, it served as a meeting place and neutral ground for various criminal enterprises that used the venue's legitimate activities as cover. Maya calling them out like that in public, naming specific details about their operations, it was like signing her own end papers, Marcus continued. Everyone in that room knew she had crossed a line that you don't come back from. Back at the precinct, Chin discovered something that made her blood run cold. Maya's cell phone records, which had taken weeks to obtain due to jurisdictional complications, showed dozens of calls to and from an unknown number in the weeks leading up to her final battle. The number belonged to a burner phone that had been purchased with cash at a convenience store and discarded the day after Maya disappeared. But it was Maya's laptop, which had been recovered from her apartment and initially dismissed as containing only music files, that provided the most disturbing evidence. Hidden within folder structures labeled as backup recordings and demo tracks, Chin found audio files that changed everything she thought she knew about this case. The files contained conversations, dozens of them, recorded over several weeks, between Trey Anderson and someone whose voice had been digitally altered. The conversations discussed protection rackets targeting local businesses, territory boundaries between different criminal organizations, methods for laundering money through entertainment venues, and most chillingly, plans for eliminating problems that got too vocal or attracted too much attention. Maya hadn't just stumbled onto incriminating information. She had been systematically gathering evidence, building a case through her music while documenting criminal activities that extended far beyond the rap battle scene. Her final battle wasn't just a performance, it was an accusation backed by months of careful investigation and recorded proof. She was trying to expose them, Chen told Martinez as they reviewed the evidence late into the night. But someone found out she was recording these conversations. The question that haunted Chen as she studied the timeline was whether David Johnson had been telling the truth about his sister's elimination, or if he had discovered Maya's research and used it to methodically hunt down her alleged attackers. The evidence suggested that Maya Johnson had been playing a far more dangerous game than anyone realized, and that her brother might have been either seeking justice for her demise or completing the investigation she had started. Hit the like button if you're still following along. This investigation is about to reveal something shocking. Chen's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor David had mentioned, called the precinct at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning with information she claimed to have forgotten during initial questioning 8 months earlier. Her voice was shaky but determined as she spoke to Chen over the phone. "I've been having nightmares," the 80-year-old woman explained, her words coming in rushed bursts. "About that night. About what I saw. I keep remembering things I thought I had imagined, and my doctor says sometimes trauma can make us forget important details until our minds are ready to process them." When Chen arrived at Mrs. Patterson's apartment in the same complex where Maya had lived, she found a woman whose frailty was deceiving. Despite her age and the obvious anxiety that made her hands tremble as she poured tea, Mrs. Patterson's eyes were sharp and her memory, once prompted, was remarkably detailed. "I saw those 3 men waiting by Maya's car, just like I told David and the police back then," Mrs. Patterson began, settling into her worn armchair. "They weren't being obvious about it, but when you've lived as long as I have, you learn to recognize when something isn't right. They were positioned so they could see everyone coming and going from the building, but they weren't talking to each other or looking at their phones. They were focused. Waiting. Chen pulled out her notepad, though she was also recording the conversation on her phone. What else do you remember? This is the part one couldn't remember before, or maybe I just convinced myself I had imagined it because it was too frightening to think about. Mrs. Patterson paused to sip her tea with shaking hands. There was someone else. Someone who arrived after Maya got home. Chen's pen hovered over her notepad. Who? David. I saw David's car pull up about 20 minutes after Maya went inside her apartment. I remember thinking it was unusual because David usually called before coming over, and Maya would always come to her window and wave at me when her brother visited. But that night was different. Mrs. Patterson's voice grew stronger as the memory became clearer. David went into the building, and then I heard shouting. Not screaming like someone was being hurt, but raised voices like people having an argument. It went on for maybe 10 minutes, and then everything got quiet. Chen felt her pulse quicken. What happened next? Here's what I couldn't remember before Maya left with David that night. I saw them both come out of the building together. Maya was carrying a bag, like she had packed quickly, and she looked upset. But she wasn't being forced or dragged. She left with her brother willingly. The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow. If Mrs. Patterson was right, David had lied about arriving too late to help his sister. He had been there. He had taken Maya somewhere. And his carefully constructed story about finding her gone was completely false. Chen thanked Mrs. Patterson and raced back to the precinct, her mind reeling with the implications of this new information. She immediately pulled security footage from every camera within a 6-block radius of Maya's apartment building, a task that had been completed months earlier but might have been analyzed with the wrong assumptions. After hours of reviewing grainy images from traffic cameras, ATM security systems, and storefront surveillance, she found David's car leaving the area at 11:47 p.m. with 2 occupants clearly visible in the front seats. The timestamp matched Mrs. Patterson's account perfectly. But the footage also revealed something else that changed everything about the case. At 12:15 a.m., the same car returned to the area. David got out alone, walked back into the apartment building, and emerged again 10 minutes later carrying what appeared to be additional bags and Maya's laptop. Chen felt the floor shift beneath her feet as she watched the footage again and again. David Johnson hadn't just lied about when he arrived that night, he had been involved in his sister's disappearance from the very beginning. She confronted David with the evidence during a second interrogation, spreading the security footage screenshots across the table between them. His carefully constructed story began to crumble as soon as he saw the images. These are from the night Maya disappeared, Chen said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. You told me you arrived too late to help her. But this footage shows you leaving with Maya at 11:47 p.m. and returning alone at 12:15 a.m. You lied to me, David. You lied to everyone. David stared at the photographs for a long moment, his shoulders sagging as the weight of months of deception seemed to settle on him. When he looked up at Chen, his eyes were filled with tears, but also with something that looked like relief. Okay, yes, I took Maya somewhere that night, he finally admitted, his voice breaking. But not for the reason you think. Maya was scared, detective. She had received threats after the battle. Not just from Trey, but phone calls to her apartment, people following her to the grocery store, cars parked outside the building at all hours. She was terrified. Where did you take her? David's voice dropped to a whisper. To a safe house. A place where women go when they're running from dangerous situations. Maya had contacted them earlier that day, but she was afraid to go alone. She asked me to help her disappear for a while until things cooled down. Chen leaned forward. Is Maya still alive? David met her eyes for the first time during the interrogation, and what she saw there made her stomach drop. She was. Until 3 months ago when Trey Anderson found her. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Chen realized she had been investigating the wrong crime entirely. Maya Johnson hadn't been eliminated 8 months ago after her final battle. She had been in hiding, successfully avoiding her would-be attackers for months, until someone had discovered her location and finished what had started that night at the cipher. This case just took a turn that changes everything. Let us know if you saw this coming. The safe house David led Chen to sat on the outskirts of the city, a nondescript two-story building that could have been mistaken for a small apartment complex or office building. Surrounded by a high fence and equipped with security cameras that Chen noticed immediately, it was the kind of place designed to be invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for it. Director Amanda Foster met them at the door, a woman in her 50s whose professional demeanor couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Foster had been running the facility for over a decade, helping women escape domestic violence, witness protection situations, and other circumstances where their safety required complete anonymity. Maya lived here under the name Sarah Martinez for 5 months, Foster confirmed as they walked through the facility's common areas. She was terrified when she first arrived, but she was also determined. Most of our residents are focused on healing and moving forward, but Maya was different. She was gathering evidence. Chen felt her understanding of the case shift again. Evidence of what? Foster led them to a small office and closed the door behind them. Maya wasn't just hiding from those men who threatened her. She was working with someone, a federal contact who was building a case against the organization those rappers were involved with. Maya's role was to continue documenting their activities from a safe location. The picture Foster painted was of a young woman who had transformed from an accidental witness to an active participant in a federal investigation. Maya had used her time in hiding to analyze the recordings she had made, identify patterns in the criminal organization's activities, and provide federal agents with intelligence that was leading to a much larger case. She had access to a secure computer system and was in regular contact with her federal handler, Foster continued. Maya felt like she was finally making a difference, using her skills and knowledge to help bring down people who were hurting her community. Chen's heart sank as she realized the implications. What happened 3 months ago? Foster's voice became barely audible. Trey Anderson found her. We still don't know how. Maya had been so careful, never leaving the building without protection, using a different name, having all her communications monitored by federal agents. But he showed up here one night with 2 other men, demanding to see Sarah Martinez. The security footage from the safe house painted a horrifying picture that Foster reluctantly shared with Chen. Trey Anderson had arrived with 2 other men, not Jerome or Deshaun, but unfamiliar faces that suggested the criminal organization was larger and more sophisticated than Chen had realized. The men had somehow obtained detailed information about the facility's security measures and had bypassed several layers of protection. Maya had been working late in the computer room when they arrived, Foster explained, her voice shaking with the memory. We have protocols for this kind of situation, panic buttons and safe rooms, but they knew exactly where to find her. It was like they had been watching the facility for weeks. The footage showed Maya being forced to leave with the 3 men at gunpoint, but not before she managed to activate a distress signal that alerted both the facility's security and her federal contacts. Unfortunately, the response was too late to prevent her abduction. We found her body 2 days later in a drainage ditch 15 miles outside town, Foster continued, wiping tears from her eyes. But David didn't know. Maya had made us promise not to contact him unless something happened to her. She was trying to protect him, keep him out of the investigation so he wouldn't become a target. Chen felt sick as she processed the timeline. How did David find out? The coroner's office contacted him as next of kin. Maya had left instructions that if anything happened to her, David should be given access to everything she had been working on. That was 3 months ago, the same week Trey Anderson turned up eliminated in his apartment. The timeline suddenly made horrible sense. David hadn't been systematically hunting Maya's attackers for 8 months since her disappearance. Instead, he had spent 5 months believing his sister was safe, only to discover that she had been eliminated just when she was closest to seeing justice served through proper legal channels. Maya kept detailed files on all of them, Foster explained, leading Chen to a storage room filled with boxes of documents, recordings, and surveillance materials. Addresses, daily routines, associates, financial records. She was building a federal case that would have put dozens of people in prison for decades. Chen stared at boxes of evidence that should have been in federal hands months ago, evidence that represented Maya's final months of work and sacrifice. What happened to all of this after Maya was taken? Foster's voice carried a mixture of anger and regret. David broke in here 2 days after Maya's body was found. He was grief-stricken and furious, demanding to know why we hadn't protected her, why the federal agents hadn't prevented her abduction. We tried to explain that investigations take time, that Maya's work was part of something much larger, but David wasn't interested in the bigger picture.
He stole everything?
He took copies of everything. Maya had taught him how to access her files during one of his visits, just in case something happened to her. We tried to stop him, but he was beyond reasoning. He said the system had failed Maya, that waiting for justice through proper channels had gotten his sister eliminated, and that he was going to finish what she started. Chen realized that the case she had been investigating, the systematic elimination of 3 men connected to Maya's final rap battle, was actually the collapse of a major federal investigation, derailed by grief and a brother's misguided sense of justice.
David hadn't been seeking simple revenge.
He had been using Maya's own research to complete her mission in the only way he knew how. The tragedy was that Maya Johnson had been closer to bringing down a criminal organization than anyone realized, and her brother's actions had not only compromised the federal case but put himself and others in danger while preventing the broader justice Maya had been working toward.
This investigation keeps getting darker. Have you subscribed to see how it ends?
Shen's phone rang at 6 a.m. with news that changed everything about the direction of her investigation. Agent Sarah Kim from the FBI's Organized Crime Unit was finally ready to talk, and what she had to say made Chen realize that Maya Johnson's case was connected to something much larger and more dangerous than she had imagined.
Maya Johnson was our key witness in a 2-year investigation called Operation Silent Verse, Agent Kim explained as they met at a secure location outside the city. The rap battle scene was just the surface layer.
Underneath, there was a sophisticated money laundering operation using entertainment venues across 3 states, with connections to human trafficking, drug distribution, and racketeering. Chen learned that Maya's final battle hadn't been a mistake or an accident, it had been carefully planned as part of the federal investigation. Maya was supposed to deliver specific information in her performance, gather final evidence from the target's reactions, and then testify before a grand jury that was scheduled to convene just 2 weeks after her disappearance. When Maya went into hiding, it was supposed to be temporary, Agent Kim continued, spreading classified documents across the table between them.
We had a timeline. She was going to surface with enough evidence to arrest 47 people across multiple states.
Her elimination destroyed months of federal work and left several other informants exposed and in danger.
The scope of the investigation was staggering.
Maya's recordings and research had helped federal agents identify a network that was using hip-hop venues not just for money laundering, but as recruitment centers for trafficking operations. Young artists were being coerced into transporting drugs and people across state lines under the cover of touring and performing at different venues. Maya discovered that talented artists who refused to participate were being systematically eliminated or driven out of the scene, Agent Kim explained. Those who cooperated were given opportunities that seemed legitimate but came with increasingly dangerous obligations. Chen studied photographs of dozens of young people who had disappeared from various hip-hop scenes across multiple states.
How many victims are we talking about? We estimate at least 60 young people have been trafficked through this network over the past 3 years.
Maya's evidence was going to be the key to shutting down the entire operation and rescuing victims who are still being held.
The federal agent showed Chen surveillance photos that made her stomach drop. David Johnson was being watched by people who weren't law enforcement.
Men in expensive cars had been parked outside his apartment building, his workplace, and his grandmother's house for the past week. His elimination of Trey, Jerome, and Deshaun had painted a target on his back that he didn't even realize was there. When David Johnson started picking off our targets, he didn't just compromise our investigation, Agent Kim continued, her voice tense with urgency. He put himself and others in danger. The organization knows someone has been systematically eliminating their people, and they've connected it back to Maya's research.
The agent pulled out additional surveillance photographs that showed David wasn't the only person being watched. Mrs. Patterson, Maya's elderly neighbor, had been photographed getting her mail.
Amanda Foster from the safe house had been followed to the grocery store. Even Chen herself appeared in several photos taken outside the precinct. We need David in protective custody immediately, Agent Kim insisted.
And we need everything Maya gave him.
Without her testimony, those files are our only chance of salvaging this investigation and preventing the organization from eliminating everyone connected to Maya's work. Chen felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized how many lives depended on the successful resolution of this case. She raced back to the precinct, but when she arrived at the holding cell where David was being kept, she found it empty.
The duty officer looked confused as he checked his paperwork.
"He made bail an hour ago," the officer said, scratching his head.
"Some expensive lawyer paid his bond and walked him out.
Said they were taking him somewhere safe until his court date." Chen's blood ran cold as she grabbed the paperwork and saw the name of the law firm that had posted David's bail. It was a legitimate firm, but one that Agent Kim had mentioned as having connections to the criminal organization they were investigating. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, Warehouse District.
Pier 47. Come alone if you want to see David Johnson alive. You have 1 hour.
Chen stared at the message, realizing that the case had moved beyond her control. David's quest for justice had put him directly in the hands of the people he had been hunting, and now his attempt to complete his sister's work might cost him his life. She immediately called Agent Kim, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Chen was faced with a decision that could determine not only David's fate but the success or failure of a federal investigation that could save dozens of lives and bring justice for Maya's sacrifice.
Where are you watching from?
This case is about to reach its explosive conclusion. Chen arrived at Pier 47 30 minutes early, knowing that going alone was tactically stupid but understanding that David Johnson's life depended on her following the instructions exactly. She had managed to reach Agent Kim's backup team and coordinate federal support positioned around the perimeter, but what she found when she entered the abandoned warehouse wasn't what any of them had expected. David Johnson sat tied to a chair in the center of the cavernous space, but he wasn't alone and he wasn't the helpless victim Chen had anticipated. 3 men stood around him, not the street-level criminals she had been investigating, but professionals in expensive suits whose presence suggested this operation reached much higher than anyone had realized. Detective Chen, the apparent leader, called out as she entered, his voice carrying an educated accent that surprised her.
You've been very thorough in your investigation.
Perhaps too thorough for your own good. Chen kept her weapon drawn but didn't advance, using the time to assess the situation and signal her backup team.
Let him go. This is between you and the federal investigation.
The man laughed, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls.
The federal investigation died with Maya Johnson.
But her brother here has been causing problems that extend far beyond some street-level drug operation.
David, why don't you tell Detective Chen what you've really been doing for the past 3 months?
18 months later, Chen stood in a federal courthouse as the last of 23 defendants received their sentences in what had become known as the Silent Verse case. The investigation that had started with 3 seemingly unconnected homicides had exposed a trafficking network that had been operating across multiple states for over 5 years, victimizing hundreds of young people who thought they were pursuing careers in music. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, survivors who had been rescued from trafficking operations, and law enforcement officials from agencies across the country. Maya Johnson's photograph sat on the prosecution table throughout the trial, a reminder of the young woman whose courage and sacrifice had made justice possible. David Johnson had testified for 6 days across multiple trials, providing details about his sister's investigation and his own misguided attempt at justice. The complexity of his situation had required extensive legal negotiations. While he had committed 3 homicides, his actions had also prevented additional victims and provided law enforcement with evidence that proved crucial to dismantling the criminal network. Maya would be proud of what you accomplished, Chen told David before his transfer to federal prison.
But she would want you to find a better way to honor her memory.
David, wearing shackles but looking more at peace than Chen had ever seen him, nodded slowly. When I get out in 7 years, I want to work with organizations like the Safe House. Help other people who are trying to expose dangerous situations.
Do it the right way, the way Maya would have wanted.
The reduced sentence, 10 years with possibility of parole and 7, reflected the unique circumstances of David's case. His cooperation with federal authorities had been invaluable, and his victims, while criminals, had been actively involved in trafficking operations that destroyed young lives. Chen had struggled with the moral complexity of David's actions throughout the investigation. 3 men were dead by his hand, but those same men had been responsible for Maya's elimination and the trafficking of dozens of young people.
Justice, she had learned, wasn't always as clear-cut as she had once believed.
The cipher remained permanently closed, but the venue's closure had sparked broader conversations about protecting artists and creating safer spaces for creative expression. Maya's story had inspired new protocols at entertainment venues across the city, including better security measures and resources for performers who found themselves in dangerous situations.
Agent Kim kept Chen updated on the broader impact of the investigation.
Federal raids across 12 states had rescued 67 trafficking victims and led to additional arrests that extended the network far beyond what anyone had initially realized. Maya Johnson's evidence had been the key that unlocked a criminal empire that had operated in plain sight for years. But it was the community impact that meant the most to Chen. The Riverside projects where Maya and David had grown up now had a community center named in Maya's honor, providing resources for young artists and safe spaces for creative expression. The center offered legal advice, career guidance, and most importantly, protection for artists who discovered information about criminal activities in their communities. Chen visited the center on the anniversary of closing the case, finding it filled with young people who reminded her of Maya, talented, determined, and unafraid to speak truth through their art. A large mural dominated one wall, featuring Maya with a microphone in one hand and scales of justice in the other. Dorothy Johnson, now 85 and using a wheelchair but still sharp as ever, served as the center's volunteer coordinator. She had chosen to honor both her grandchildren's memories by ensuring that other young people had resources and protection that Maya and David had lacked. Maya always said that words had power, Mrs. Johnson told Chen during one of her visits. She believed that speaking truth could change the world, even when it was dangerous. David learned that lesson too, but he learned it the hard way. The memorial wall at Studio 7, where Maya had recorded her final tracks, had grown over the months to include photos and memories from dozens of artists whose lives had been touched by her story. The plaque Chen had noticed on her first visit had been expanded: Maya Johnson, artist, truth teller, voice for the voiceless. Her words changed the world. Fresh flowers were always there: roses from Dorothy Johnson, who wrote to David every week in federal prison, daisies from the women at the safe house who remembered a young rapper who had risked everything to protect others, and microphones left by fellow artists who understood the courage it took to speak dangerous truths. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute was the annual Maya Johnson Memorial Battle, held each year on the anniversary of her final performance. Unlike the underground battles of the past, this event was held in legitimate venues with security provided by both local law enforcement and federal agents. The rules were simple: artists were encouraged to speak truth, expose injustice, and use their platforms to protect their communities. Winners received scholarships, recording contracts, and most importantly, legal protection and resources if their performances exposed criminal activities. The event had already led to 3 additional federal investigations and had given dozens of young artists the support Maya had never received. Chen attended the 3rd annual memorial battle, watching as a 17-year-old girl named Ashley delivered a performance that exposed illegal activities at her high school with the same fearless precision Maya had shown. But unlike Maya, Ashley stepped off the stage to find federal agents waiting to protect her and lawyers ready to ensure her safety while her testimony led to arrests and justice. As Chen watched Ashley being congratulated by other artists and surrounded by people committed to her protection, she realized that Maya Johnson's final battle had indeed been her last performance, but her voice continued to echo through a justice system she had died trying to serve. The case that had begun with 3 bodies and a grieving brother had transformed into something larger: a movement that protected artists who spoke truth to power and ensured that courage like Maya's would never again go unsupported. Maya's story lived on not just in court records and federal case files, but in the lives of young people who now had resources, protection, and most importantly, the knowledge that speaking truth could change the world without requiring them to sacrifice their lives for justice. Sometimes the most powerful lyrics weren't written in rhyme and rhythm, Chen reflected, but in the policies, procedures, and protection systems that ensured other voices could speak without fear. Maya Johnson's last verse had become an anthem for justice that would play long after the final note faded away. Let us know what you think about Maya's story in the comments below. Her courage changed everything and continues to protect young artists today.